Sahib. It's an honor for me to be here in a very illustrious gathering. And, I'll try to manage something which I can present to you, which is coherent and has some relevance to the subject and perhaps contribute also to what you were trying to develop. Starting from the name Sanober, I think it's on the flag of Lebanese flag also, the same tree. Am I right?
This is a different pine, but that's also a pine tree.
Okay. I think it is found in Ziyarat also.
Yes, sir.
Ziyarat also, the life of this tree is thousands of years sometimes.
That's right.
So coming back to the subject, we have to take account of our foreign policy or foreign policies over the decades, last 4 or 5 decades, and then try to create a policy which is more relevant to the present situation in our region and world at large. In my very, very humble opinion, I just received a message from a good friend in media that you were at variance with the opinion of your leadership or the government regarding Mr. Modi. So I was telling him that the government's policy is diplomatic, and diplomatic statements or policy can be interpreted in multiple ways. I speak my mind more bluntly, and you cannot interpret it in different manner or ways. So, commenting briefly on why we are confronted with this situation, which is sometimes we feel that we are in a dead-end street and we do not have many options. Our foreign policy during the different decades, especially last 5 decades or 6 decades, or even the 60s and 50s, was dictated by the compulsions of people who were in power. They wanted to stay in power, and the foreign policy of the country was subjected or was subordinated to their interests. Starting when we joined CETO and CENTO in the 50s and missed some good opportunities to have diplomatic status which is more relevant to our region. And then we missed opportunities in 60s also, had a foreign policy which was massively tilted towards one power bloc. And I think the only bright spot in our foreign policy, the history of our foreign policy, is our relationship with China. The remaining attempts we made to formulate our foreign policies did not make any coherence and reduced our relevance on the international stage and sometimes in our own region also. As I said, that our foreign policy most of the time, or rather all the time, was subjected to the interests or subordinated to the interests of the rulers, then rulers. Like for instance, our entry into Afghan war in the late 70s and then in 80s was basically the then military ruler General Zia wanted to have some sort of guarantees from superpower for his support within the country, some sort of I'm trying to find a better word. And we entered, ultimately what happened, you all know, you are much better informed than me. And we entered the Afghan war. And for that decision, which was made by a dictator to perpetuate his rule, the nation is still paying. Every day we pay for that decision. It was a very sad decision, a very tragic decision. And then we again made the same decision the early years of this century. Same decision, same mistake. Again for the same reason. Then another dictator wanted to perpetuate his rule. And he wanted to have support of a superpower. These two very, very grave mistakes changed the trajectory of our foreign policy, or rather formulated the trajectory of our foreign policy, for which perhaps not only this generation, but perhaps in coming generations will also pay the price. It affected our economy. It affected our political ethos also. And we, almost as it was hinted by introductory remarks also, isolated and trying to find friends for our economic security. Because in my humble opinion, unless you have economic security, you cannot have an independent foreign policy. That's just not possible. Today we find ourselves in a dilemma where we don't want to offend the West and still have friends in our region, especially China. I was briefly foreign minister also, and I tried to advocate that our foreign policy fundamentally should be, number one, take the considerations or take our neighborhood into account, and then formulate a broader foreign policy which can relate to the West also, to US also, and countries which are beyond our region. Then we have our traditional friends from the Gulf and Middle East. And there was a time when we could talk to them from a position of advantage. We don't hold that position anymore. We have lost that edge also, lost that advantage also. And that is again because our foreign policy was not subordinated to national interest. It was subordinated to the interest of just single individual, whoever was the ruler at that time. First it was General Zia and then it was General Musharraf. We have to find, we have in this gathering some very, very experienced diplomats who have immense knowledge of diplomacy and our role on the international scene. And they can perhaps formulate a policy which is more relevant to our times. I was with Prime Minister the last 3-4 days in China. Chinese have been our very good friends since the late 50s and then the 60s. and some of the opportunities which were provided to us as a nation, as a country, by our geography or by just accident, were lost because we could not handle or we could not balance between the different or divergent power currents on international scene. Coming to our immediate neighborhood, I'll come to India later, but let's take the example of Afghanistan. We have almost sided with everyone who has been ruling Afghanistan in the last 4 or 5 decades. And lost everybody. Utter failure of our policy, of foreign policy. You don't have many friends over there. They're all our, I don't want to use the word enemies, but they are not our friends. I visited them a year and a half back. I was very, very blunt. And they are obviously they have immense confidence, and that's I think very justified. They have defeated a superpower. I think after Vietnam, the Afghans have humbled a superpower. And what we have on our plate or confronted with is a situation where we are in a dead-end street. Every day our soldiers are martyred. By a setup, but by a group of terrorists who were midwifed by us. Let's admit it. Who were midwifed by us, supported by us. Their factional struggles or battles or wars were triggered by us. And we are trying to find a way in this, from this way out from this mess. At least in my humble opinion, we do not have choices available to us to get out of this mess or this situation. We find it is really difficult. There are countries who are or who have influence in Afghanistan today, and we happen to have a good relationship with those countries. Perhaps we can ask them to play some role in having a neighborly, if not brotherly, at least neighborly relationship with Afghanistan. Coming to India, is an interesting situation which has developed in India after the recent elections. Mr. Modi is not that comfortable. He's adding a coalition government which, if manipulated properly, can create political troubles for him. Manipulated in Pakistani style, so that will be that can bring some dividends for us also, you know. But we have to wait and see, and I don't see any change or qualitative change in Indian attitude or Indian approach towards Pakistan in future, or I can't predict the long-term future, but whatever analysis I can make out of the situation, the changes Modi made in the status of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, even if there's a new government in India, it will be very difficult for them to change that status. So we cannot bet on any change in India. We'll have to find a way out of the situation, and that is up to the diplomats to find, or our security experts to find. And obviously we have political leadership also who are pretty experienced as far as Indian situation is concerned. So summing up my remarks, I personally feel that at the moment our foreign policy, for at least for some time, maybe a couple of years or 3 years or 4 years, if we steer our economic policy properly, perhaps we can create some room for ourselves to have some freedom in our foreign policy also. At the moment, our economic woes are compelling us to have a foreign policy, a very difficult foreign policy, to balance between China and Russia on one side and US and US allies on the other side. We have GSP Plus, we have IMF and other international financial institutions, and we need them. And our needs cannot be met if the Western powers are not on our right side. But at the same time, we have to create some space in our foreign policy to accommodate our regional interests also. For space for our approach towards Russia, China, and our friends across the Gulf, across the Persian Gulf, and Iran also. One good development in the last few months is that we have a better relationship with the Iranians now. And we must strive and struggle to create some sort of goodwill for us in our neighborhood. Because of our activities of last 4 or 5 decades, we don't enjoy a good reputation. Let me be frank about it. As sponsors of Taliban, as sponsors of what happened in Afghanistan in the last 3-4 decades, क्या हम लोग बदनाम भी हुए और मिला भी कुछ ना. We are actually carrying the excess baggage of our foreign policy, or whatever you can call it. It's not, you can't call it foreign policy when it is looking after the interest of a single individual who's your president or who's your ruler at that particular time. चोइस साहब ने कहा कि the foreign policy should be discussed in the parliament. I'm in the parliament since 1991. I have never seen foreign policy being discussed in the parliament. 35 years is quite a long time. I do not even know where the foreign policy is now formulated. So we are confronted with a situation that we have to find a solution. We do not have a choice. We do not have the time. We do not have the choice. The luxury of time or choice is not available to us. So I think we are undertaking some measures whereby we have some economic independence, not complete, some economic independence, providing us with some choices to develop a foreign policy which is respectable and give us some dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khala Asif Sahab. I know